Good evening and good to have you with us on this edition of the Urban Debate. Tonight we begin with the latest in the Sushant Singh death mystery, viewers. And of course, a day-long courtroom drama is what the entire country saw, with various sides presenting their arguments. The fight is about who is going to investigate Sushant Singh's death. Should it be the Mumbai police that was the first one to file an accidental death report in this case? Should it be the Bihar police that filed a FIR after a complaint from the family? Should it be the CBI? That's the big fight. Now, before I go across to our reporters, let me just briefly take you through the arguments in the Supreme Court. This is what the RIA's team had to say. Ria Chakrabarti, who's seeking the transfer of plea from Patna to Mumbai, had to say that all that happened was that she was in love, but now she is being traumatized by all of these probes and investigations and the media trial. That the stories are being cooked up, the case is being exploited for political purposes. Her lawyers also said that the Bihar police registered a case at the behest of the chief minister, and Mumbai cops and the Mumbai police was proceeding with their investigation quite substantially before this development took place. They also said that there has been considerable interference by the Bihar government. On the other hand, those representing the Bihar government, the senior counsels, they said that the Bihar police has acted in accordance with the law. There was a complaint filed and FIR registered. Maharashtra government hadn't even registered an FIR, so where is the argument here? They went on to say that in fact the political pressure is in Maharashtra, which is why the investigation hasn't gone in the right direction. That the Mumbai police hasn't been cooperating in this case, and that we cannot transfer the case till the final report is prepared. I'm going to go across to Meenakshi in just a bit to get you more details of what happened in the courtrooms today. In fact, the Supreme Court has asked all parties connected to now submit a written note of all the past precedents before the Supreme Court decides on this case. Meenakshi, at the heart of this fight is jurisdiction. But interestingly, every single side, especially Mumbai and the Bihar police, as well as Ria Chakrabarti, spoke about interference and alleged political influence.
Well, that's right, Tanvi, and not to forget Sushant Singh Rajput, the deceased actor's family's counsel also sought to introduce an element of drama today in the proceedings when they said, citing media reports as to how purportedly the Chief Minister Maharashtra's son's name is also being dragged into the case. So all sides seeking to lend an element of drama to try and accentuate their legal points, because remember, what is at stake here is the transfer jurisdiction powers of the Supreme Court of India. Now, ordinarily, these transfer powers or the transfer jurisdiction of the Supreme Court is used very sparingly, Tanvi. You have to point out to a lacuna in investigation. You have to point out to shortcomings in the probe. You have to point out to malefied for the Supreme Court to be convinced to want to transfer the case from one venue to the other, which is why we saw Dr. Abhishek Manu Singhvi, who was lending his might for the government of Maharashtra, tear into these arguments, saying that these arguments are looking to turn the aspects of criminal law on its head. Why did he say that, Tanvi? Simply because there is a rudimentary principle in criminal law, which is this, that no accused or victim can demand to have a preferred set of investigator, be that the accused or be that the victim. They need to point towards gross shortcomings, lapses for the Supreme Court to really intervene. And that is why Dr. Manu Singhvi for Maharashtra also said that this would be an assault on the principles of federalism if this is permitted, because Maharashtra, according to him, has been given a bad name. Now, interestingly, our viewers will recall this was the story that we had also brought to our viewers a couple of days back when we highlighted as to how the Maharashtra government is not hesitating to even hit out at the CBI, saying that what was the hurry for the CBI to register FIR in this case, given the fact that the outcome of this proceeding in the Supreme Court is not yet known. On the other hand, Sushant Singh Rajput's family's counsel, Mr. Vikas Singh, also today heightened the drama in the court, saying as to the fact that the Mumbai police's investigation thus far is directionless. It is taking the probe into an entirely different direction, so much so that the family has lost faith in the probe. Now, what is very interesting is the view of the solicitor who was representing the investigating agency CBI that we saw today being presented in the Supreme Court. The solicitor was of the opinion that at the outset, this has been called a suicide. There has to be a logical, cogent explanation and investigation which implicitly points to this death as being suicide. That has not happened in this case, and therefore the jurisdiction of CBI, or the intervention of CBI rather, is made out. So very interestingly poised matter, but all sides very heightened drama in the Supreme Court, lengthy voluminous
Yes.
arguments, which is why we saw the Supreme Court reserve the verdict today, Tanvi. We do not know when the verdict is likely to be pronounced. One evening in advance before the pronouncement, we will learn of it.
Mm-hmm. Yes, and Meenakshi, the fact that there were such top lawyers, top legal minds there in the courtroom, fighting it out, just made the argument so much more interesting. Few of those conversations, what we highlighted for our viewers in the day. Thanks so much for joining us and, summarizing what happened in the Supreme Court. I also want to quickly go across to Santya, who's been tracking the investigation of the Enforcement Directorate here in Mumbai. And they continue with their questioning. Santya, who was questioned today and what is it that they were told?
So Tanvi, it all started with Shruti Modi appearing at ED office early in the morning, and she left in the afternoon. And this is actually for the third time Shruti Modi was questioned at ED office. Before this, it happened on Friday, it happened on Monday, and now today. After Shruti Modi, it was Siddharth Pithani's turn to arrive at ED office. Tanvi, and at that time, and again for Siddharth Pithani, it is for the second time. Now we are expecting some action here. Actually, Tanvi, it is expected that Meetu Singh, Sushant's sister, who was called by ED, she is likely to come out. That's expected as of now. You can see that the cops are here at the gate of ED office, and so Meetu Singh, Tanvi, is actually the first member of Sushant Singh Rajput's family who was called by ED, who is investigating, looking into the angle of money laundering, because that's the allegation of Sushant Singh's family, Tanvi, that how according to Sushant Singh's family, Riya Chakravarti and her family members, along with Shruti Modi, the manager, and Samuel Miranda, house manager, siphoned off money from Sushant Singh Rajput's account. And ED, who filed a case on 31st of July, actually, Tanvi, the case of ED is based on the FIR which was filed by Bihar police, which names all these people as accused in charges like abetment to suicide, criminal breach of trust, cheating, wrongful confinement. And ED has mentioned that how ED's case is actually based on Bihar police's FIR. As of now, Meetu Singh, who arrived at ED office today afternoon, Tanvi, we are expecting that she might come out in some time. You can see the cops on the gate. There are a couple of vehicles which are waiting outside ED office, and it will. We are talking about at 8. It's been almost 7 hours that Meetu Singh has been inside ED office. Tanvi.
Okay, so we're going to track that story, and Santya, of course, is there at the Enforcement Directorate. Santya, we'll keep coming back to you. For now, Meenakshi and Santya, thanks so much for joining us. Viewers, let's welcome our panelists. We've got former top cops and top legal experts joining us on this conversation. We're not going to speculate on what the facts of the case are, barring those that are related to the arguments at this point, barring those facts that are linked to the jurisdiction. Who should be investigating this case? Now, I have a thought for you as well as for our panelists. If I look at the arguments that were actually made on behalf of Riya Chakravarti, even in her second affidavit that she filed in Supreme Court, she has said that, well, this complaint was only filed in Bihar at the behest of the Chief Minister. There is a lot of politics that's going on. Political pressure is there. There is a media trial that is being conducted, and I am being targeted unfairly. Political influence is involved in the Bihar FIR was one of the key points and key arguments made by Riya Chakravarti and her side. Now, if I had to tell you what the Bihar police said, again, they said political influence in Maharashtra prevented the FIR from being filed, and which is why they shouldn't be investigating this case, but somebody else needs to do so. If I tell you what happened on behalf of Maharashtra government, well, when Abhishek Manu Singhvi was presenting this case, he said, well, the entire case in Bihar is linked to the Bihar elections, and there is no complaint to Maharashtra police till now, not a single one. If somebody wants to stretch that, we can do. We all know that in the state of Bihar, there is an election soon coming up. After the election, you won't hear of it. So my question here is, as I go across to our panelists, who should really investigate this case if everybody is pointing out to the same factor, to an external influence, to politics now getting involved? How do we ensure that the truth comes out and the justice comes out? Let's say good evening to Mr. SK Bhardwaj, former DGP of Bihar, Prem Kishan Jain, former Additional General of Police for Maharashtra, Sanjay Hedge, Senior Advocate with the Supreme Court, and Kailash Vastev, also Senior Advocate with the Supreme Court. Sanjay Hedge, let me begin with you. We all know the numerous controversies that have been linked with CBI, the kind of political linkage that happens when CBI comes into a case. Same allegations are now being made for the Maharashtra police, for the Bihar police. In such a scenario, what is the option left? Who should be investigating this case to ensure that a fair probe is done?
What is there to show that Maharashtra is not doing a fair probe? Number one. Number two, is there been a crime committed at all? Mr. Rajput's father says that there has been some financial crime committed. That is a separate issue. With regard to the death, has there been a crime committed at all? So far, the evidence does not lead me to that conclusion. Then comes the third thing. The death occurs in Bombay. The financial irregularities also have happened in Bombay. Normally, all this has to be investigated in Bombay. If you go any other way, let me give you an example. There have been a lot of deaths which took place in the Delhi riots. There are people who are upset about the kind of investigation that has happened so far, where only one party seems to be blamed, another party is not even looked at. Can they in turn say, no, we are originally inhabitants of Karnataka or Tamil Nadu? Since the Delhi police is not doing a fair investigation, I want the Tamil Nadu police to register an FIR and then send it to the CBI, and then will the CBI get jurisdiction that way? That's not how the law operates. And the Supreme Court is very careful simply because it will get out of all this media hoopla about this particular case. When the Supreme Court gives a judgment, it also has to look as to the precedent that it sets. It cannot set a dangerous precedent where if an investigation is found to be unsatisfactory or perceived to be unsatisfactory by somebody who is related to the deceased, then that deceased relative can go file an FIR elsewhere and then ask for the CBI to take it over. That's not how things should operate.
Okay, but here you said why would there be a question mark on the Mumbai police's investigation purely for the fact that they carried out a so-called investigation for over 40 days on the basis of an ADR. And here is the Bihar police saying that there hasn't been a fair probe because of political influence.
Just what is an ADR? An accidental death report. Once the death is reported, you investigate. Is it homicidal or is it suicidal? If your investigation says it is suicidal, then all that you can thereafter investigate or you can look for criminality is, was there any abetment to suicide? So they were looking at the attendant facts with relation to the suicide. Now, is there anything which conclusively says that this is a murder? No. The postmortem report doesn't indicate it. Let me just illustrate this further. Very often we go to the high courts under 482 of the Criminal Procedure Code saying quash a particular FIR. how you quash a particular FIR because that FIR does not disclose criminality. My old teacher used to explain it to me this way. He would say, like, if in the FIR it is written there's a dead donkey on the road, then no crime is revealed. If, on the other hand, it is written that there is a dead donkey and before that I saw so and so beat it to death, then possibly there is a crime. Today, is there something which positively shows that there was a crime? There is an investigation. There's a criminal investigation launched, even under an ADR. And it can come to a conclusion by filing a charge sheet, or it may file a negative report. If you are dissatisfied with the negative report, the law is that you can complain to the magistrate. And that is what has happened. I'll give you another famous example. The famous example was the Gujarat riots. Zakia Jafri was not satisfied with the result of the investigation, which recommended a closure. She therefore was told by the Supreme Court to go and file a complaint before the magistrate. The magistrate said no. Then against that, the matter is now pending in the Gujarat High Court. There are processes in law. Do not jump the gun.
Okay. Let me bring in Mr. Bhardwaj on this. Mr. Bhardwaj, why jump the law? Why jump the steps? Let Mumbai police investigate, go to a court if you want to appeal to it. Where does the Bihar police come in? Especially in this specific case where the death happened in Mumbai.
Yeah. Actually, the Mumbai police, the conduct of the Mumbai police is not proper. Number two, Bihar police has filed FIR under section 154 of CRPC, whereas the Mumbai police so far has done only the accidental death or unnatural death inquiry under section 174 and 175 of CRPC.
And because a part of the crime, that is, some of the bank accounts belong to Bihar, some of the bank accounts belong to Mumbai, the part of the crime has taken place in Bihar. That is why his 75-year-old father, who is the only legal heir of Sushant Singh Rajput, he has filed an FIR. And now the Bihar police is competent, Bihar state is competent to ask for an inquiry, investigation by CBI. CBI has already undertaken the investigation, and CBI has got the jurisdiction over whole of the India. So once the small cause of action has taken place in Bihar, then the case can be investigated anywhere in India. And if you see the ligature mark, of course, I have not seen the postmortem report myself, but the initial pictures of the ligature mark, yeah, the initial picture of the ligature mark was not below the chin. It was in the lower part of the neck. Whether the hyoid bone is broken or not, it will be clear from the postmortem report, and only that will be the sure shot to the cause, that is when he has hanged himself. And the threatening of quarantine to the SP was lawlessness, and now the state of Mumbai is asking when the officers from CBI will come, they will also be quarantined. This is a life threat. So the conduct of Mumbai police is completely, and they are roving inquiry. The longer they rove the inquiry, the evidence will wither away. And who has stopped the Mumbai police to file an FIR when the new facts have come to light by the father of the deceased?
Well, Because we don't know if the parents actually told them what they suspected and later on went and told the Bihar police. Mumbai police claims they didn't. It's not there in their statement, which is taken in front of Sushant's brother-in-law, who himself is a top cop. And this is not mentioned. That's what the Mumbai police claims. Now, as far as the post-mortem report is concerned, we don't know. Nobody has seen the post-mortem report, not in the full at least. One page here and there may be doing the rounds, but that doesn't tell us the full story. And so rest of it is for the Mumbai police really to decide or tell us, or at some point court. But if I can actually take that point across to Mr. Kailash Vasudev, Mr. Kailash Vasudev, the fight over Mumbai police and Bihar police, one argument that gets made is they only filed an ADR. They hadn't even filed an FIR. So they can't really object to Bihar police then starting an investigation.
This is putting the cart before the horse. Bombay police is investigating into the matter. It is acting on an accidental death report. Where this case is going is because of the finances involved. The parents of the deceased who died in June are now turning around and saying that this is not a simple case of suicide. It is somebody being driven to suicide because of the money involved. So it's a case of abetment of suicide at the most on the facts which are now available. If there is a dissatisfaction that the police have done an investigation in Maharashtra for 40 days, please go to the magistrate. You have a remedy available under the Criminal Procedure Code. You don't try and defeat the law by filing an FIR in a state which does not have prima facie jurisdiction, because the death is in Bombay. Residences and all the persons who are involved in this are in Bombay. So where is the question of Patna or any other place coming into the picture? Second aspect. The third aspect. First is go to the magistrate under 156, he will pass orders. Second, the jurisdiction in Patna. I don't want to comment further on it because the transfer petition is pending in the Supreme Court. The Honorable Court will decide in its own merits. Now we come to the CBI. The CBI is coming into the picture not because of anything else, but because of the pressures being created on the CBI in a matter which has become high profile. Everything is going strictly by what is being heard on the media, in the media, and through the media. Both sides are using the media, and the media is playing into it. Either we make up our minds that this is an ADR, an accidental death report, which needs investigation. Let that investigation be completed. Then lodge your FIRs. Money allegations do come in because they say there are very large stakes of money, large sums of money which have been played around with. Well, if it's been played around with money, it does not come within the purview of an FIR, which comes in Bihar. It should have been done in Bombay because all the transactions took place in Bombay. That's what the news is. So therefore, this whole case is now getting into a rigmarole which can be avoided. Please tell me one question. I have a question. You have so many suicides which take place in Africa. Some involve matrimonial discord. Some involve a financial discord. You have cases where whole families have committed suicide over money matters. How many times did the CBI come in an interstate rift? There were cases in Noida where a whole family committed suicide having accounts in Delhi. 11 members of a family committed suicide in Delhi with affairs all over the country. Where did the CBI come in?
Yes.
In many a case, we bring in the CBI to show down the state police for the purposes of political gain. Here, we are looking at a political situation which is being fought over the policeman's shoulder. Maharashtra police is not incompetent. No one says that. They say because they have not chosen to do so, so therefore Patna. Well, the Maharashtra police will do what it has to when the time comes. It's investigating. It is calling people for investigations. Now you file a FIR in Patna to preempt the Maharashtra police from continuing. Why? Because they said, no, there's money involved. But no one is saying what the cause of death is. If it's suicide simpliciter, all this closes.
Right.
If the suicide report comes, the post-mortem is available, possibly because of which the Bombay police is dragging its feet, saying that, look, prima facie, we don't see a case to put in an FIR. Now you're putting pressure on them to lodge an FIR in a matter which they must have come to a prima facie finding. You have a difficulty, as I said in the beginning, go to the magistrate, ask them for a disclosure, see what the situation is. But this is definitely not the way to drag the CBI into a simple suicide or a case where money has been taken away by cheating or fraud. We are misusing the
Okay,
system.
I need Mr. Prem Kumar Jain to respond. Yes, I'll come back to you, Mr. Kailash Vasudev. I need Mr. Jain to respond to what Mr. Bhardwaj said about Mumbai police not doing their job right, which is why, others have to step in. Mr. Jain, one cannot deny the fact that for over 40 days, the Mumbai police went to town, calling one after the other, big celebrities, taking their statements, asking them questions. We don't even know how many of the close relatives were actually called for statements. The family says they didn't follow the route that we told them to take. What do you have to say to the allegation that it's because the Mumbai police didn't do a good job that somebody from outside Bihar police or CBI has to step in?
See, both the legal luminaries who spoke before me have very categorically and clearly put the legal facts across and the legal provisions across. I do not agree with Mr. Bhardwaj. He has been the Director General of Police of a particular state. The rules pertaining to the jurisdiction are very, very clear. In this case, the entire cause of action took place in Mumbai. Now, the only question remains is everybody is asking why Mumbai police did not take action for 40 days. That's why Bihar police registered a case. Let me clarify here that an inquiry under section 174 of CRPC is also an inquiry which is akin to investigation. In this case, the FIR is registered only on two particular counts. One is if the investigating officer finds something amiss, some criminality in that death, then he himself becomes the complainant and registers the case. Or the second scenario is where any relation of the deceased lodges a complaint and he becomes a complainant and the FIR is registered. In this case, the first statement, which was recorded on the 15th or 16th of June, in the presence of a senior police officer from Haryana who's related to Mr. Sushant Singh, did not disclose any suspicion on their part. After that, in the next 40 days, they never approached Mumbai police with any of their doubts, with any of the additional statements or complaint. They straight went to Bihar police and got an FIR registered, which was absolutely wrong, illegal. Now, if an investigation starts on illegal FIR, I would call it illegal FIR because they had no jurisdiction whatsoever. I have been maintaining it all through. If they had no jurisdiction, they registered FIR under political pressure and then sent a team here.
Oh, okay.
Therefore,
We seem to have lost that line with Mr. Jain. Mr. Jain, we're going to try and connect with you.
The FIR can be registered only, as I said, under
I think we've got the feedback. Go ahead, Mr. Jain.
Yeah, one is that either the investigating officer becomes the complainant or some family member or somebody else who knows some facts about that particular incident or death, he becomes the complainant. In this case, none has happened. Neither probably, I have no access to the documents available and records available with Mumbai police, but had the investigating officer found something amiss, any criminality in this case, he would have certainly registered an FIR. Or in this case, for whatever reasons, the family never came back to Mumbai police to lodge a complaint. That is, and they straight went to Bihar police. Then how do you expect Mumbai police to register a case? And second part is that when the statements were recorded in the presence of a senior police officer, who is also an IPS officer, I don't see any reason why he could not have advised the right course of action to the family. So I find that whatever, now the matter is already pending before the Honorable Supreme Court, the decision will be coming in the next 2-3 days. But what I find is that whatever wrong has been done by Bihar police is being condoned. Everybody is saying that Mumbai police did a wrong thing, they did not cooperate, they did not hand over papers, and they quarantined the officer. Quarantining the officer, maybe. I personally don't agree with that kind of a step on the part of any authority. It was not certainly Mumbai police, it was the local municipal authority.
Yes.
But as far as the other parts are concerned, not cooperating, as they are within their rights. They are already looking into a particular case, and then some other agency which has no jurisdiction steps into their area and wants to investigate is not the done thing. It
Yes,
does not.
But Mr. Jain, you will agree, quarantining Vinay Tiwari wasn't the right step. They could have gone to the court and said, well, look at this, they're coming in from another jurisdiction, going all over town, speaking to our witnesses, meddling in our probe, and we are already investigating the case. They didn't do that. Let's all agree, and I think all four of us will agree, that there is a lot of drama, unnecessary theatrics that has been linked to this case. The facts are of, seldom spoken about, only drama, speculation and conspiracy theories. Look at what's been presented in the court right now. Everybody's one strong argument is political interference, is political meddling or possible interference, or FIRs being filed at the behest of a CM. On the other hand, Mumbai police covering up facts because there may be some high profile politicians involved. All kinds of arguments were made today, and we know what the reputation of CBI is. Well, if nobody is rid of political interference, and if that's what this case is going to come down to, then who investigates? Let's keep Bihar police aside for a minute. I would go ahead and even say that the Bihar police angle maybe was just a kickstart to this case. Maybe it was just a red herring. You set the stage up, and then you get the CBI in. Maybe a CBI investigation is required if the Mumbai police doesn't do their job right. Now, between the Mumbai police and the CBI, where do we stand? Let's start with Sanjay Hedge. Mr. Hedge, the centre has recommended a CBI probe. They've taken charge. They've started investigating. Mumbai police is sitting here, still taking statements or waiting for a Supreme Court verdict. Which way should it go? If both are accused of being pressurized by politicians?
It's not as if the CBI is not pressurized. You've seen what happened to the CBI director.
Correct.
So let's not put them on any kind of pedestal. The point always is, what is the law? The law on jurisdiction is clear. Now, what is the law on botched up investigation? If nobody has a right to say that the investigations can go only this way, that because I am related to the deceased, I know what the investigation should be. You may be satisfied with an investigation, you may be dissatisfied. If you are dissatisfied, then the law is you go under 156(3). You go to the magistrate and say, you please ask the investigating officer to investigate further. Or that this report of closure that is passed, these are my objections to it. You take a call on that. Now, without any of that happening, there are several assumptions made. First assumption, that the family, the birth family knows best, that the friends and the partners in the life that he has made in the new state know nothing, and that they are villains. Secondly, that investigation in the place of occurrence, that investigation is crooked. Investigation is straight only if it goes in accordance with what the family wants. That is simply not the law. And you cannot, right from the beginning, dictate the conclusion of an investigation. If an investigation says that this is a suicide and it has cogent reasons for coming to that conclusion, it is a rare court anywhere in the country which would set it aside. Now, without that, you say, okay, you damn an investigating agency, and then you say that it is only an investigation which has the blessings of the Bihar government and the center that will satisfy me. Then a question will naturally be asked. Are you also playing politics?
Okay. Well, that's the point, and that's what I mentioned when I said all sides. Mr. Bhardwaj, how is bringing in the CBI going to be any different? CBI, in fact, in the last couple of years, the most number of messy situations, big allegations of corruption, political influence have been made against the CBI. The multiple former CBI directors are under investigation. So with what authority should we bring in the CBI to investigate this case, saying that, well, everywhere else there is political interference?
CBI is known for its integrity. Number two, the larger issue of the justice cannot be denied only on the basis of technical points. Now, because the matter is in the Honorable Supreme Court. I don't have to say anything. But the CBI has got the jurisdiction in whole of the India. And how can somebody question the integrity of CBI? Every normal citizen, if there is some complicated case, will demand for CBI inquiry. So CBI inquiry has already started in this case. Now I think the Maharashtra police or the Maharashtra state should be happy that ultimately they will find out the facts, whether it is a case of murder or suicide or abetment to suicide. Now the Supreme Court has to take a decision about the jurisdiction. And the Supreme Court so far has never asked in any other case that the case will be investigated only by the police where the jurisdiction lies. Generally, it is written in the CRPC that whenever a cognizable crime is committed, then the SHO will start the investigation in its jurisdiction. But so far, the Honorable Supreme Court has never made a decision that you cannot investigate the case outside its jurisdiction. I think the larger issue of justice cannot be denied on the basis of technical points.
Don't call
Okay,
it a
the larger
technicality.
issue of justice. In fact, let me add to what you are saying, Mr. Bhardwaj. Even Riya Chakravarti herself, 15 days before this case turned on its head, had tweeted demanding a CBI investigation in this case, wanting to know the truth. And that fact was actually brought up in the court today, where the Supreme Court, asked Riya Chakravarti that don't you want a CBI probe? You had asked for it. And the response was, well, I want a fair investigation. I'm scared that the fair investigation will not happen if Bihar police is investigating it, because there is politics involved. And of course, nobody can be sure if that's going to happen, even if the CBI now comes in. That's one matter. Let me bring in a second aspect, which has now become a point of controversy. And let me ask our legal experts, Mr. Kailash Vasudev. Many are saying that once the post-mortem report is out, and it gives you a clear indication of what was the cause of death, then the police, Mumbai police, should not have gone on with its ADR. Either you file an FIR and continue with your investigation if you feel there is still a need for investigation, or you close the case. What is your own view on this, legally speaking? Once the post-mortem report is out, should they have at least filed an FIR then?
You see, when you receive a post-mortem report, you may accept it, you may seek a further post-mortem. There's no bar in law. So therefore, the Bombay police is taking its own course for whatever is available to it. I have three questions before the two officers of the police. Under the CRPC, if a crime is committed in one state, there is no bar for the same police to investigate in the other state with the permission procedures. Am I right? I'm asking Mr. Jain, Mr. Bhardwaj.
Mr. Kailash Vasudev, I'm so sorry, but I think we have a network issue with your line. We're unable to understand what you're saying, but let me bring in Mr. P.K. Jain on this. Mr. Jain, do you have a view on it? Why didn't they file an FIR after post-mortem report is out? And I was reading an actual past precedent in this case, which is the Ashok Kumar Todi case, where the Supreme Court said investigation under 174, Section 174 and Section 175 of the CRPC can only continue till the outcome of the cause of death, post which the police has to either close the case or file an FIR. So if the Mumbai police didn't file an FIR, one definitely have to ask the question, why?
See, there are a lot of speculation going on in the press, in the media, that where a lot of production houses are involved in harassing Sushant Singh, because of which he has committed suicide. So whether the angle of abatement to suicide is there or not, see, it has to be explored further. The post-mortem only says that the death was due to asphyxia. It could be suicidal or it could be
Mr. Jain, are you there? I think he got a phone call in between, so that's what happens if you get interrupted. Very quickly, let me take our viewers across what else was the argument by the parties present in court today. Remember, this is what the court will consider when they make a decision, of course, apart from the fact that some past precedents on such an issue will also be submitted. Here is what Ria's lawyer, Advocate Shyam Devan, had to say, that there was a delay in Bihar police FIR. They didn't do it for the first 38 days. It's only after that, but of course the complaint was filed with them much later. They said that the satisfactory investigation is already going on in Maharashtra. All the averments have happened in Mumbai. There is no cause of action arising in Bihar and political influence involved in Bihar FIR. And of course, the point about media trial repeatedly being made by Ria's lawyer there, that this case is being utilized extraneously as in a case of a relationship of a boy and a girl. The Chief Minister had to intervene. In this case, the trial by media, which is a parallel trial now, is undesirable. To a certain extent, perhaps, yes, the trial by media is something that shouldn't have happened. Viewers need to know that much better and not really believe everything that goes on, barring the facts that are presented by official authorities, the facts that are presented in the Supreme Court. Let me see if we've got Mr. Jain back on the line. Okay, Mr. Kailash Vasudev is back with us. Go ahead, please. We couldn't hear you the last time. You were making a point about the FIR not being filed by the Mumbai police.
An FIR lodged in one state does not preclude the particular investigating officer of that state to investigate into other witnesses in the third or fourth state if it is spread over a fair. The law accepts it. Second, in the recent few days, there have been quite a few suicides in this industry which catches a lot of eyes. How many cases have gone to the CBI? They have also involved money matters. There are issues which have come up in those cases. The Bombay police has not been blamed for a bad investigation. Here the matter has come in because there is money involved. Because there is an attempt here to bring in issues and situations which are not relevant for the purposes of a suicide or a death which has taken place. We are mixing up a lot of matters for the purposes of demeaning a police force, against which there are no allegations excepting saying that they are dragging their feet. Dragging feet does not mean that the investigation is poor or bad. Supposing today the Bombay police turns around and says that the Bihar police is being mollified, do you realize what we are doing in a constitutional pattern? Two state police officers fighting against each other. For what? Publicity? Politics? Is this policing? We must put an end to this someplace. Otherwise, you will have a terrible situation in investigations over the country. This death is of June, mid-June 2020. We are in mid-August, 2 months down the track. In these circumstances, what is the option available to one? Go to the magistrates. Please don't do what you are doing just now. You cannot beleaguer an entire police force because of a convenient system. Don't do it. You have in the political field, you will open up a box which you will never be able to control. The Supreme Court is being very conservative in its observations, and rightly so. Because the moment you start doing this with one police force blaming the other, the fabric of a federal police system will break down. Policemen are all federal. They come under the central government directly or indirectly. You cannot turn around and say one force is worse than the other or one force is worse than the other. It is not your jurisdiction. It is for the government to decide which is right and wrong. You have political cases. Look at the charges of corruption all over the place. Did not necessarily all go to the CBI. They can be investigated locally and they are done. Look at the cases against the small-time politicians, the MLCs or the councillors who appear for the municipal corporations. They don't go to the CBI. They're done by the local police. Let's keep the law in mind and then proceed. Just because you feel you have the authority, you cannot possibly exercise it in a manner contrary to what the law provides. The CRPC is a complete code. The Delhi Police Special Establishment Act is a complete code. There are ways and methods in which you exercise powers. We are abandoning everything. For what? Press. publicity, wanting to get into that, and the press is having a raving time with TRPs. Everybody wants to be heard. Everybody wants to have a conclusion. Everybody wants to decide. Moment this investigation comes to an end, everybody in the press would have vanished. Nobody would bother. There are so many instances. Matters of moment, yes. Matters over, forgotten, out. But in the meantime, the damage to an impression, the damage to people has been done. In this case, supposing nothing is found, what happens to the persons, this Riya Chakravarti, XYZ, LMN, OPQ are being called by the ED and all, to which you're giving so much press coverage? What happens to their reputations? Is there anyone going to defend them? What happens to their future careers? Is someone going to come and protect them?
Yeah.
The industry will, there, look, these people are involved with something which is fishy. Finish their careers. They are also professionals. You see, we must draw a line someplace.
Yes.
You cannot carry on like this. Trial by media, trial by press, trial by
Yes.
assumption.
But I will agree with you, Mr. Kailash Vasudev. I will agree with you when those who are not directly linked to the investigation, those who are not part of the investigative agencies, they go around, naming and shaming and carrying out their own independent investigations. But when established agencies, national agencies, CBI, Enforcement Directorate, strong police forces, whether it's the police force of Maharashtra, Mumbai specifically, such a competent force, or even the Bihar, Patna police force, when police forces, investigative agencies get caught up in this political drama full of conspiracy theories, drama and rhetorics, then I don't know. I agree with you. I understand where your sentiment is coming from. But what happens to what's at the heart of this case? Just a suicide? Murder? Was there abetment of suicide? Who was responsible? Are there facts that have been covered up? Now these questions will have to be answered because far too many people have asked these questions. Who will do that is the question. And this is the thing that goes on in my mind. And perhaps that's what the Supreme Court will have to think a lot about. Look into the past examples and then tell us what will be done. Fact of the matter is there are allegations and some serious allegations against the Mumbai police. They didn't react to when alerts were sent by the family of Sushant in February. All right, there was no official complaint. Did they at least look at that angle after Sushant was found dead? Didn't they think it was important to then look into these dynamics between the family and Riya Chakravarti to see if their allegations made sense? I don't know. The Mumbai police doesn't tell us that. The Bihar police has no business here, but they filed an FIR. They came, traveled all over Mumbai, putting up a show in luxury cars and auto rickshaws, traveling from one part to the other, saying we are going to do the investigation of Bihar ka beta. If people don't see politics in that, then what can one say? And the CBI, can we really put it up on a higher pedestal than any other police force, especially in the light of all the controversies and allegations in the past few years? Well, the tough task is now with the Supreme Court. They will have to decide who investigates this case, and we'll keep you posted on that. Thank you to all of our panelists for joining us right now. Well, the aviation regulator, DGCA, has now decided that no wide-body aircraft will be allowed to land at the Kozhikode airport this monsoon season. In the light of the Air India tragedy at the Kozhikode airport, the DGCA has barred use of the wide-body aircraft, which would require a lot more space and would be a lot more challenging in terms of landing at this airport. So this monsoon season, at least, has abundant caution. These planes will not be allowed to land there. viewers, tonight we're going to tell you about a story that makes us ask the question if airlines often compromise on safety, your and my safety, air safety, just to save some cost. Now, a few times we've had debates in the past about the aviation sector, about the rules and regulations, the planes that are being used. Experts have often said this to us, that there is a nexus that tries, and airlines all look at certain playing around with rules simply to cut costs, save some money. Now, I don't know, but this is the question I am going to ask our experts. Why are we talking about this today? Just a few days after a crash took place in Kozhikode, when an aircraft that landed on the runway couldn't stop on time, overshot, and then fell off the runway into a gorge, leading to that crash. The investigation into what happened there is still on. We don't know. We will wait for the final report. But let me tell you about another story. And this is what the aviation regulator, DGCA, decided to do today. They have suspended 2 top officials of Air Asia for a period of 3 months. Now, these are not just pilots. These are not just any vertical heads. These were vertical heads of perhaps what I would consider as a consumer, as a flyer or a passenger, the most important part for an airline. One of them was actually the head of operations. The other one is the head of flight safety. And both these officials have been suspended by the DGCA for 3 months for violating safety norms. Now, what exactly happened? I'm going to have a guest who will tell us about it. Let's say good evening to Captain Amit Singh, active pilot and an aviation safety expert. I also have Wing Commander Praful Bakshi, former aircraft accident investigator with the Air Force and an aviation expert. But first, let's go across to Captain Gaurav Taneja, a former Air Asia pilot. And in fact, Gaurav, we understand that it was your complaint that triggered this entire case. That you raised an alarm about what was going on, a policy that was being followed by the company for which you had to bear the brunt of it, but finally the DGC has acted on it. Now help our viewers understand what is the core issue here.
So I came into AirAsia, I joined AirAsia last year, and as soon as I came, I started flying with the company. I found certain rules to be totally absurd, and I raised those complaints or the violations to my seniors, to my heads, to the head of operations, to my chief pilot, to my safety pilot chief. And I was surprised that instead of acknowledging and saying we will look into the policy, they wrote back emails that of harassment, and they were trying to put me down and trying to tell that it is you're not supposed to do this. This is not your job. Your job is to just fly the aircraft. So I flagged 3 main safety concerns. The concern number 1 was the airline was forcing its pilot to do a reduced flap landing. Now, what is a reduced flap landing? It saves fuel once you land. There are 2 configurations to land an aircraft. One is in specific aircraft which AirAsia flies, one is flap 3 and one is flap full. So if you make a landing in flap 3, it saves a bit of fuel, around 8 kgs per landing. But it is also, you come in with a higher speed. And when you come in with a higher speed, you need more runway length to stop. Once you come in with flap full, you burn more fuel, but you come in with a slower speed that gives you more time to react, and also gives you less runway length to stop the aircraft. So you cannot put a number on a pilot who is the best judge of that aircraft. My question was, I was not saying that we can't do flap 3. I have done so many flap 3 landings, and I was so much into fuel saving and cost saving that we have to save cost for the company because the company is putting bread on our table. But now what happens once you go to an aircraft like Calicut, like Kozhikode, when there are tailwinds, when there is rain, the weather is bad and there is pressure, and you have already made one approach which has failed, you have to make second approach, and you are towards the end of your duty time. It's a long duty time. You have been working for last 11, 12 hours. Now to choose and make a flap 3 landing, it is foolishness. And now if the company is forcing you to do that, they are signing on the paper for an accident. Now, number 2 complaint was regarding to the COVID guidelines, which company was not following. I put it on paper. There were certain guidelines by the regulator issued on 17 March and 24 March, and they were not following that. They were putting passengers' lives at risk. And another complaint was that they were putting fatigue pilots in the cockpit. By that, what I mean was if the pilot was not fit to fly, if he thought he's fatigued, he's sick, the company was taking a punitive action because I chose to take my sick leave on a day. They were penalizing the captains, they were penalizing their crew to report sick.
So, what happened? Did you raise these issues with the head of flight safety, with the head of operations? That I have concerns. I don't think it's okay for you to put it down in black and white to say you need to be landing in this specific manner. What was the response?
Yeah, I raised it to my chief of flight safety that this is a safety concern, that we might be putting fatigue pilots in the cockpit, and he replied to me that, well, we know there is a problem, but then he tried to put it under the carpet, and he just wanted to shut the discussion right then and there, because what happens if you make a pilot if a pilot reports sick, then they were pulling out the pilot off days. So now they were saving man days. They were giving less offs to a pilot. So if I have, let's say, in the month of August, I have 5 offs, and if I decide to report sick, they would take out one of my off. So I only have 4 offs left. So in fear of that, the pilots were not reporting sick. They were taking a decision. Is it that important for me to report sick today? They were asking themselves and putting all the passengers' lives at risk. They were going in to fly the aircraft with not them being 100%. I've put all the 3 concerns, I've put it in writing so many times, and finally, when nobody was listening, I put it to the regulator, DGCA, and finally, when DGCA failed to listen, then I had last resort was social media.
Okay, let me also highlight this for our viewers. Viewers, it's very important for us to know this, because only if we start asking questions will there be tougher rules enforced, will there be a closer scrutiny by the regulators and those who are in charge of ensuring that safety norms are not violated. Here is another story from October 2019, almost a year ago, and Times of India had reported it, that DGCA had found alarming practices being carried out by some airlines, and there was a crackdown even at that point of time following a spate of incidents and accidents that took place during the monsoon season. Aircraft overshooting runways, suffering tail strikes on landing, that led to then the DGCA investigate what was going on, what was the real problem, and they found that there were some practices being implemented, perhaps like what our expert is just telling us, like Captain Gaurav said. Perhaps that's the kind of practices that were being used simply to save costs, to save a little bit of fuel when a flight lands, and to cut that back on that kind of a cost. Let me ask Captain Amit Singh this question. Captain Amit Singh, DGCA found that 98% of the landings in this specific case were happening in the flap 3 mode. Is that normal? If not, how concerned should we be?
Well, safety is a matter of balance between production and protection, as I've been saying, and it is a very common line. Anything in excess will lead to harm. Now, safety is basically governed by Annex 19, the Safety Management System. So it is a system, in a sort, it is a quality control of safety, which has a plan, do, check, act mode. So it has a feedback also. So when something, we have a SOP, now we need to see if the SOP is working for us or not. Now we get a feedback, does it work most of the time? Is it safe? If it is not working, then we need to go back to the drawing board and revise it, then again implement it. Here, if we go as per our whims and fancies, then we are compromising somewhere. Now, the role of the regulator is that they are responsible for the risk level taken by the operators. The operator has a safety management system. They need to analyze all the SOPs, the standard operating procedures, as per the IQ requirements, and push it to the regulator. The regulator will ultimately decide, yes, this is acceptable to us or not. Now, The oversight is a bigger issue. The airlines, if you ask them how many times in the board meetings do they discuss the balance sheet, that is maybe every 5 minutes. But how many times do they discuss safety in the board meetings? Maybe once, or maybe in a board meeting for a few minutes. So safety has become a thing of which is mandated by the regulator, not to implement it in the true sense. So ultimately, what happens is that operations and commercials take over. So the normal thinking is that we have to run the airline. So that philosophy is not correct. DGCA as a regulator has empowered safety. That is why the head of safety is appointed or selected also by DGCA. There's an interview, there's a selection process. Because the role of the regulator is now delegated to the chief of safety. That is a very important role. And the chief of safety also reports to the board of directors of the airline. So the airlines are basically undermining safety by not listening to the most important person who is in charge of safety, and rather going as per the balance sheet requirements. So this has to be brought back to the true sense by means of instilling confidence in the head of safety and projecting him to be a very important position. Normally, if you see, the head of safety will be somebody who is not flying, not in active flying, or who is medically down, or who's retired, which means you're not giving that much importance to safety. And a person who's the head of operations is mostly in the limelight. So if that is the way safety is governed, so we'll end up with more and more accidents. Now, we have a blinkered vision to safety, which means we want to do the bare minimum which is desired by the regulator or IQ. And prime example is the Kozhikode airport, wherein they have earned 200 crores in 2018 as revenue, but they haven't invested a penny towards safety. Now, it is a tabletop runway, night operations. The requirement is that if you have centerline lights, the pilot will be more aware, situational awareness is greater. Why hasn't it been installed? Because the IQ Annex 19 doesn't mandate it, it recommends it. So everybody would say that it is a recommendation. Why should we install? But IQ also says that if your runway lights are more than 50 meters spaced, in Kozhikode they are 60 meters, you should have centerline lights. So that becomes a recommendation, so nobody accepts. And similarly, approach lights, which are very important. You have something called a black hole approach optical illusion, especially in Kozhikode. So that's a safety concern. So everybody goes as per what is the basic minimum requirement. You were talking about wide body operations. Now, on the sides of the runway,
let's just do the basic minimum requirement and then get out of it, because who will waste more time and effort into anything more? Anything which is not mandatory, anything which is not compulsory, which is not directly linked to our business or existence, doesn't need to be done. Now, maybe then the DGC needs to come up with tougher safety rules. That's one point. A very important point that Captain Amit Singh raised is about the flight safety expert. Who gets hired? Flight safety head. Who is that person? What's your criteria for bringing in that person? And are they able to do their job without a pressure from the rest of the company about saving costs and cutting costs, especially in these times where every business is having a tough time? Wing Commander Praful Bakshi, good evening to you. You've heard our other two panelists. Go ahead, please. What's your own view? Should we be concerned tonight that companies are looking to ways to save money at the cost of our lives?
What a question. I really am quite surprised, because I have spent my entire life flying, and I am a fighter pilot and I am an accident investigator. When I'm hearing the arguments of our friends out here, I am absolutely flabbergasted that organizations can run like that. I am telling you, I was there in the last 10 years back, the tabletop accident. I went there and took the media with me and did a 3-day study. And whatever findings I had, the same thing came out in Gokhale report. They came out everything. But the question is still there. Who listens to it? The flight safety, as far as I'm concerned, the organization where I have worked, Air Force, is paramount. If the pilot says it is unsafe, it is unsafe. He raises an OHR report, Operational Hazard Report. It goes right up to Air Headquarters. This is never heard of. And you see, I don't blame the commercial airline because they have to earn money at the cost of the safety of the passenger. That's clear. You can make out. The question is, if you know something about aviation, there are some airfields in the world which are still using crash barrier. Why the crash barrier is not being introduced? We asked 10 years back and we were told they are thinking about it. There were airliners which were using tail parachute. You know what they say? Oh, now they got reverse thrust, so they don't require tail parachute. And because it was very costly, the manpower had to go and fold the parachute. Manpower had to maintain it, cost cutting. So the cost cutting was always for the requirement of was at the behest of flight safety of the passengers. And that's what I'm telling you. Both the tabletop accidents, I'm telling you, could have been saved if there was a crash barrier. Both could have been saved. And most of the accidents on other places, if a tail shoot is a must, but then the cost cutting is there. And then I'm telling you, I've heard the captain was speaking about the leave and etc. It is unheard of. If the person is sick, he is sick. It is never, balanced against his leave. It is criminal. So that is why our suggestion was that DGCA's working should be checked to start with. The problem lies with DGCA. We must have an ombudsman flight safety body reporting directly to the minister. That safety body go and do surprise inspection of all the airlines whenever they want and check up what are the things happening like this. All the reports which the pilot do must go up to DGCA to be heard. This sort of a system cannot exist because everybody is making quick money. Let me tell you one thing, and the DGCA is being run by non-professional. It is the biggest aviation body in the world, in India, and a non-professional, non-aviator runs it. Bureaucrat runs it. My God, what a strange thing to happen. That is why I'm telling you, we have never given aviation a proper understanding, a mature thought. That is the problem with Indian aviation. And that is what our two...
Well, I don't know what it will take for this country to wake up and take our aviation wing commander, Bakshi. I don't know what it will take in this country for us to start taking our air safety of people seriously. And repeatedly here on Mirror Now, we've brought out instances including faulty engines being used after one airline and the other, and the DGCA simply giving them the long rope, simply giving them more time to fix it while these planes continue to be operated, risking hundreds of lives on a daily basis. And nobody cares. It's because nobody asks these questions. It's because we're all waiting for that crash to happen. One crash has happened now. Even now, we don't seem to be getting the point. If I can just go back to Captain Gaurav Taneja. Captain Gaurav Taneja, from my conversations from other pilots who've been on the show, often they have raised this issue that many of these policies, unsaid, unwritten policies that are implemented by airlines compromise on passenger safety, on the flying safety, and yet if something goes wrong, it's simply put on the pilot. Pilot is the one at the end of the day who is accountable, even though the policies are getting designed at a management level.
Yes, it happens every day. A prime example I'll give you, if a pilot reports sick, an airline is all the year round, you will hear them say, we are short of pilots, we are short of captains. Now, this never goes on paper, so it never comes to company on email, it goes to DGCA. But what happens inside the cockpit is when a pilot reports sick, now the management will call them not from the official number, but from the personal number and ask them or request them to fly the next day, because citing reasons that they are short of crew, they're short of pilots. They're forcing the sick pilots to fly. Now, once in one instance, I was flying with this first officer. He was having common cold, and when you fly with common cold, it's very dangerous because it can rupture your eardrum. Now that poor chap, he joined airline just 6 months back. It was his first job. He is just fresh out of the flight school and he doesn't know how the airline runs, how the management runs the company. He said, okay, I will fly. And then that poor chap flew and then he had to be at home for 4 days because his eardrum was paining so bad that poor guy could have lost his entire career because he could have ruptured his eardrum. That's how they take you for a toss. And there is no grievance redressal system. A pilot is scared to report anything to the DGCA in the fear that they might now come back at him in some other way and try to give him bad flights, try to give him 4-sector flights instead of 2-sector flights, try to not give him his leaves, and all sorts of things. If you report anything to DGCA, I want to ask the DGCA if they are watching this show, do you have any grievance redressal system? Do you give any complaint number to the guy, to the pilot who is giving a complaint? Or do you promise to solve the complaint within certain time duration, 3 months, 4 months, 6 months? The complaint lies on the table for years. I know so many people that have complained since I became a whistleblower. There are so many pilots that came up to me, they messaged me, emailed me that this is my complaint, nothing has happened. And still nothing is happening because I had the privilege of going onto social media. I had the courage to standing up for public safety. But what price I had to pay? I had to lose my pilot uniform. I had to lose my wings. This was my dream. I left my career. I graduated from IIT Kharagpur. I left my engineering career for my passion, which was flying. And these guys stripped off my wings because I stood for flight safety. Not everybody can afford that. Everybody cannot afford to lose their job. That's why people stay quiet.
Yes, absolutely. So there is no grievance redressal system. I find that very shocking, Captain Amit Singh. If pilots have an issue to raise, at the end of the day, as a passenger, I am putting my life in the hands of the pilot. I believe that the pilot will take the right decision at the right time in my interest and not in the company's interest. Now, if they want to raise their voice, if the company is not going to be listening to them, does the DGCA not? Is there no proper process for that?
Well, yes, as I said, to check the box, just to tick the box, they have a process of anonymous reporting or voluntary reporting. But how does that work? They have given an email ID of a senior DGC official. Now, if you give an email ID, it no longer remains anonymous. We have anonymous reporting system in other countries wherein it is a process wherein the identity is not disclosed if the person desires so. But here we have a simple email ID, just write to the email ID, but that is not a confidence building measure. Now, the safety culture which prevails in India does not promote voluntary reporting. So one of the biggest issues in generating a safety culture is reporting culture. Now, unless people start reporting voluntarily without fear, the trust will not build. So that is the common crux, the safety culture. Now, the regulator does not trust the operator does not trust the pilots do not trust both of them. So there is no trust. They never know who will bite another one behind the back. So developing trust is the biggest thing, and just culture is what prevails in aviation, which means everybody can do a mistake, an honest mistake. So you have to differentiate between an honest mistake and a willful violation. Here, in terms of the regulator seeing it, they have no differentiation. Like in 2019, about 45 pilots were suspended for violations. The root cause was something else, but just to crack the whip and show that we have done some work, regulator decided to suspend people for 3 months, for 1 year. For what reason? Without giving a reason, without the proper investigation being completed, they were suspended. Now the pilot thinks that, okay, 3 months or 6 months, I will stay quiet rather than taking it up in the court wherein it will be there for years on end, or filing a complaint or redressal system, or going through the redressal system if there is any. Now, the time is the biggest issue. The pilots, if they sit on ground, lose money because majority of their income is in terms of allowances, flying allowances. So, of course, the regulator knows that. So 3 months, which means it pinches somebody too. So that is the way people are punished here. Now, just culture is prevailing on papers. So everything is there on paper to show the international bodies, yes, but
Right.
practically nothing is being implemented because people at the helm of it do not understand. Now, I have a simple question that if safety devices, safety implements are so expensive, that is what the perception is amongst the regulators and other policymakers, has anybody even thought of calculating the cost of an accident? Now, there is a way of calculating the cost of a diversion, cost of an accident. There are insured cost and uninsured cost. Insured, you get money, which the minister is also saying that aircraft is insured. Uninsured costs are between 5 to 10 times the insured cost, which nobody knows. It seems so, the policymakers, because they're unaware. So your loss of production, the brand image takes a hit, loss of man days, overtime, and you have to pay extra payouts or insurances, compensations. So it is an international, the figure is internationally available in health and safety regulations. So to avoid that, good companies invest a lot in safety so that people do not fall sick, people do not get hurt, and if they invest in their people, they will further take care of the passengers. That is a generic.
Well, I understand what you're saying, Captain Singh, and that's essentially what should happen by good companies. But what we are looking at are repeated instances where companies are actually focusing more on steps and ideas and jugaad to cut costs, compromising the safety. They're actually going the other way around to save costs and to save money. I'm completely out of time, but very quickly, last comment with the Wing Commander Bakshi before I wrap this up. Go ahead, sir.
You see, my request and suggestion would be that the Pilots Association must write to the Prime Minister and tell him that make the key result function of every airline safety of passenger and the crew and not earning money. They must give it in writing, and it should be a national news and national cause. Must be made transparent in all fields that safety of passengers and the crew is paramount. Money earning is secondary. It should be made official. This is not being made official. People are just giving it a lip service, and that is why all this is happening.
Well, you know what, you're completely right, Wing Commander Bakshi, but you know, even though the bit of information which is in the public domain, we don't get accountability, let alone this level of transparency. I hope this happens. I hope this is an eye-opener for our viewers and for our airlines. It should come as a warning. The step that DGCA has taken should happen a lot more if such violations are found. Your and my life cannot be taken so non-seriously just because it's highly technical for us to look into and we don't talk about it enough doesn't mean that our life doesn't matter and that air safety isn't important. If DGCA cannot get it right, then perhaps an overhauling is called for and the government needs to look into it. If the DGCA can handle it, then they need to step it up. And they need to look into what each airline is doing. What is their policy? Speak to the people. Speak to the pilots. Understand, are fatigued pilots being repeatedly put on roster simply to cut costs? Are we looking at various landing techniques to save on fuel simply to save on money? And all of this by jeopardizing your life and my life? We will continue to ask these questions. And we will continue to highlight where there is a violation for safety when it comes to our airlines. Thank you so much for joining us on this conversation.